Welcome back to another of Conversations in History. My name is Greg Norman. We are lucky enough to have with us one of the members of the class of 2021 for the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association. Dale, you're being inducted into the Hall this year for all your work on the east side of Detroit in the Macomb County area. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you for taking the time to talk to us and thanking you for all the work you've done with lacrosse with kids over the years. So congratulations.
Thank you. And again, I'd like to thank you. And it's a great honor to be considered or to be nominated and considered for this. It's so exciting for me.
Yeah. I guess I want to start, where'd you grow up? What high school did you go to?
Where'd I grow up? I grew up in the Warren area, in Warren, Michigan area. And I spent most of my life in there. Went to Warren Woods High School, and after some college and what have you, ended up getting married to a wonderful woman, Diane, and we moved over into the Fraser area. And then from there, we moved out here to Macomb, and that's when I started in the lacrosse. Explain
to me the very first time that lacrosse stick came across your landscape. How did you get involved in the sport?
My oldest son was entering Eisenhower High School, and there was mention of a lacrosse team or lacrosse club starting there. And so we went out to a couple sporting goods stores, and I go, son, I don't know anything about this sport, but it looks interesting. And I talked to some of the people, and then it just rolled on from there. And going to the first couple practices, dropping him off because he was a sophomore at the time, not driving. And I walked onto the field after one practice and asked the head coach, I said, I see you're a one-man band here today, who was Frank Kaminskas. And turned around and I says, how can I help you? I really want to see what I can do to ease up, because you got your hands full with 20-some young players here. Hand me a clipboard and hand me a stopwatch, and he says, welcome to my team, you're assistant coach. And I came home and told my wife, and she goes, okay.
You're talking the mid-90s, 93, 94, somewhere in there?
Pardon me?
You're talking the mid-90s, 90, 94, 95, somewhere in that?
95.
95? Frank, were you an athlete in high school?
Pardon me?
Were you an athlete in high school?
Yeah, football and track.
Okay.
I heard that lacrosse was around in the area, and after the fact, and turn around, and I wished I would have known about it when I was younger, because I would have joined up some kind of team or camp or something when I was in the high school area, because with the years experience that I have in the lacrosse family, I really enjoy it.
So you're handed a clipboard and a whistle, and you become an assistant coach to a sport that you don't really have any understanding of. Is that fair?
That's fair. Fair enough.
Where does the education start? Where does your education start?
It was basically on the field. And then I picked up a couple lacrosse books because there was nothing online to train you. And I started asking around, asking people, of course, at that time there was only 20-some teams in Michigan, period. And as far as I knew, and just start paying attention and helping out what I could with the practices and stuff, but not really giving any direction or anything because I didn't know anything. But then I picked myself up a stick and came home and read the books and started doing what I was, start practicing in my backyard and stuff like that. And of course, my boys, my oldest was a sophomore, and my youngest, he showed interest in it, and he was 4 years younger than his brother. And we went out to a couple fields where they had lacrosse goals, where my oldest boy could really take some shots in practice. And somewhere in the middle of the season, he came home with some goalie gear. And I go, "Oh, you're going to be a goalie?" He said, "No, we're going to go to the field, Dad. I'm going to suit you up as a goalie." I go, "What?" Well, that didn't last too long. I got hit in the shins a couple times, and where pads weren't. And I go, "No, you shoot at the goal, not at that anymore." And it was all in fun. I mean, I loved it.
When you take over a program that you know very little and the parents know even less, does that make the transition into the sport a little easier?
Yes and no, because the following year I started the Macomb Mustang youth program, and I was doing double duty. I was helping out at Eisenhower again as assistant coach, but I ended up starting the Macomb Mustangs. And through the first season of lacrosse at Eisenhower, we didn't have a lot of fans in the stands. And through my experiences of other sports that I had, football, baseball, basketball, you got to have the fans there and the support of the parents. So I started promoting parents to start coming out to the games at Eisenhower and also the Macomb Mustangs. And then I started reaching out and trying to get the parents to assist one way or the other. And I decided at the Macomb Mustang level, I'm going to start some kind of seminar, because just like when I started, I didn't know anything about the sport. So in the early years, I started the seminar nicknamed it Lacrosse 101. Well, we got a few parents and a few players, young players in the youth, and they started showing up at the seminar. The first couple of years, I did it twice a year, and all of a sudden we got parents that are showing up at the games, and there's understanding, why is my boy in a penalty box? Why is my boy at this end of the field and he can't run to the other end of the field because he's a defenseman or whatever? And I felt it actually helped the program meaning lacrosse itself.
Okay. So you're at Eisenhower for a year, and all of a sudden you start what becomes a very successful middle school program called the Macomb Mustangs. Are you the kind of person that jumps in with both feet for everything, or was it a love of the sport? What was it that got you so involved so quickly?
Well, I normally don't jump in with both feet, and it was kind of funny. When my youngest boy wanted to play, and that's what started the Macomb Mustangs. And I met up with a gentleman that ran the EMLL program, and he says, "Oh, I got a position for you. I need a coach to run a program down by you." He says, "My coaches aren't responding to me, and I think they stepped away or whatever." And I go, "Okay, what can I do?" And he says, "Well, you can have it was called the Troy team at the time." I said, "Well, can I move it to closer to my house?" He says, "I don't care, as long as we have a East Side team." And I go, "Great." And the EMLL was run by Stan Orzell at the time. And Stan gave me some pointers and what have you. And I came home from that meeting, and I had the big L on my head. And I go, I signed up for something else, hon. And she's laughing, and she goes, you're not getting involved with the middle school. I says, no, I'm running a team. And the L is not for losing, it's for love of the sport. Because I loved that first year so much. But then it just grew after that. The youth program grew after the first 2 or 3 years. We just continued on. Was a little rough trying to break into the Parks and Recs area because they didn't want to deal with another sport and getting fields available, but I worked with them, and we ran at I want to say my family, because my boys helped. My wife did the bookkeeping for us and all the scheduling. So with all that, the Macomb Mustangs ended up being a fairly good team. It wasn't just one team, one middle school team. We ended up at majority of the time with one fifth and sixth grade team and 2 7th and 8th grade teams, which fed the area really well. You know, over the past 18 years of the Macomb Mustangs, I'm going to guess over 700 players, and I ended up recruiting parents as fathers as coaches, and a lot of them went on to high school.
The cool thread of these interviews has been every community has a Dale Forbes or a Frank Mhslca. Lacrosse has grown in the last 50 years because people like you have taken the time to put their volunteering into helping young folks understand a sport that they love. Do you remember when it was that in your mind, when it was like, this is no longer just I'm a dad and a coach and a kid, and this is a real big deal for you? Do you remember that point?
I'm going to say, really, it was like when I started understanding the game and was able to say, let's go do this. And it's probably that second or third year. The first in the middle school, I'm going to be mostly talking about that, but I was learning a lot from Frank in high school and what have you. And I would bring it down into the middle school, and also I recruited some of the players from Eisenhower to come down and help me. And that first game that the middle school played, I was really frustrated. I had more kids in the penalty box than I had on the field. I had 20-some minutes in penalties. And I'll tell you, parents from the other team was not happy with me. And when it all came down to the end of the EML season, we won the championship that year. So that was the first year of we actually called ourselves the Utica or Macomb team. We didn't have the nickname of Mustang'S yet. And we ended up doing real well. And I think that's when it really hit me, when all that rolled out at the end of the season.
Talk a little bit about Frank Mhslca, who everybody called Big Papi.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about him and what relationship you had with him.
It was more or less on the field relationship. We had it was really nice. It was, he was, took me under his wing, and, game time, he was able to focus on the game, where I was focusing on, moving players in and out, the bench stuff. He gave me a lot of pointers and a lot of help. That's all I really can say. I mean, it was his inspiration was a big factor in my life to get me going. Watching the boys in the game time, run and cradle, and I just the one case I can remember real well in my mind, and it was my own son. Matter of fact, he was running midfield down to the attack, and his stride. It was an evening game. His stride, and it was just beautiful. It was like a deer running down the field, and that's how I felt about it. So with you know Frank giving me pointers and helping me out, he knew he needed help. He just didn't want to reach out for it. But being that somebody came in and asked to help, it took a lot off of him, and be able to have that Eisenhower program being successful. And we were having trouble with the school district, more or less the athletic coach, athletic directors and stuff like that. And I asked Frank, I said, you want me to handle this? I can be more of a politician, and you get the program, firm and solid. And he says, please. So I went on and talked to the athletic director, and he was a handful. And I ended up going to the Utica Community School District athletic director, and I dealt directly with him in that second year.
I don't know if you know this or not, but at one point in the late 90s, early 2000s, I believe your program was Eisenhower, Stevenson, Ford, and Utica High. Am I correct?
Yes.
And the funny part,
we only had a couple players from each area,
right,
one or two, but it was more or less like a
unified.
Eisenhower United.
I say that because the funny part was that I coached the first Mhsca co-op team that they'd ever put together, which was a ski program back in 2004. And one of the criteria for a unified team was to have 3,500 was the threshold for enrollment. And we at one point added up all the schools that you guys had for your United program, and you guys were like 9,000. So you guys had a huge program, and it was very successful while you were there.
Yeah, well, in that time, once Frank more stepped away, and I ended up taking over the Eisenhower program. I was director, program manager, head coach, whatever. I set some goals, and through my work, I know you set goals for yourself. And one goal was to make it individual schools at Utica Community Schools, but I know I couldn't handle each one. The other goal was to allow the expand, let's say, to a JV program, which I successfully made it into a varsity and JV. Now, we were considered a club, and they initially tried to make us a club varsity team.
Right.
And I had to prove to the fact that they had other club teams that were not considered club varsity. They were considered varsity teams, and I had to prove that to the school district too. And then a couple other small goals that we had some very successful boys end up being ranked really high in the state, and to get a championship because we were Division III at that time. Did not make the championship, but I did set up all the other goals I set had happened. The issue with other schools, I couldn't get the involvement of players and parents and teachers. We did lose the Stevenson. I met with a bunch of Stevenson boys and actually talked to a coach that was going to coach them, but he ended up passing away before the program started, which was not good. But as the programs grew, as my Macomb Mustang programs grew, I ended up getting coaches and some of my coaches went on to coach Stevenson. I think one of them went into Ford. The Romeo School District, I had a number of my coaches go that way. I mean, it was phenomenal to see these, as it grew.
Under Bob Lancey, the longtime football coach, a very successful football coach at Eisenhower,
Yes.
he put Eisenhower on the map as being one of the best football teams in the 90s, 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s. So you were at least blessed at Eisenhower to have athletes. You always had great athletes at Eisenhower. That was never an issue. Is that fair?
Right. Well, yes and no, because we were not taking from them. That was a big misconception of the school district. They were afraid that lacrosse come around, we're going to be taking athletes from the football team, for the baseball team, and making them a year-round lacrosse player. And I had to prove to them that if you got dedicated players in your sport, they're going to stay with your sport.
Right.
I'm only opening up the opportunity for other students to be there, to be part of the community, and join the lacrosse team. And I think out of the 8 years that I was at Eisenhower, I think we only had one, maybe two players change sports into lacrosse. The rest of them were just young players that young people that wanted to do something, and they ended up finding a nice home, and they found their love for lacrosse too.
You started the Mustangs in '96. How long? The Mustangs still run now, am I correct?
The Mustang'S?
Yes.
The Mustangs started in '96, and they ended up in 2013.
That was the last year.
That was the last year. We had poor enrollment. There was other programs out there that I don't want to say provided more, but gave the opportunity to be out there. We never advertised in Macomb Mustangs. We just told them that we're here. We want to train you folks, and the Unica community supported towards the year 2011, 2012. They supported another team, but I had turned around and said, they wanted us to be exclusive Eisenhower players coming up. And I told them I can't do that. I mean, I was feeding schools like the Lance Cruz School District, the Romeo School District, of course, Utica, and some of the private schools, De La Salle. I sent a number of players to De La Salle and Brother Rice. So with that, I just said, we're going to do our own. And then in that final year, I only had two players that were going to return. And so that's when it was time to say, okay, we're going to have to, and I was up in age at that time too.
The term that's thrown around, there's travel lacrosse, which is Mustang-like, but you were more a community-based program than necessarily a travel team. Is that fair?
That's fair. We were more of a travel team. We played local teams, but we also went out to Novi.
I guess what I'm asking is that your program was low cost, affordable for the kids, and so that's what I mean by community-based versus travel, which tends to be a much more expensive program, and they travel out of state and those kinds of things. That's what I'm really trying to get at. Does that make sense?
Yes. We did have that during the summer. We had tournament teams or travel team.
Right.
But that was a second to the more function was towards the Macomb Mustang, the local community, local teams. And after the EMLL, a program a few years after that, a program or a league started, the MYLA, Michigan Youth Lacrosse Association. And I was in the initial stages of that and helping with the bylaws, et cetera, et cetera. And we stayed with that. And that was basically, I want to say, based out of Cranbrook area.
Okay.
And we stayed with that all the way to the end.
It's what's now known as suburban lacrosse. It's the same, just the same organization with a different name. And
Okay.
we're involved in some of those things. My question to you is that lacrosse in Macomb County has been a little slower to develop than it might be in Oakland County, or it might be in other parts of the state. And I just wonder if you had any thoughts on why it's developing now quite rapidly, but it's been a little sort of catch up. Is that fair?
Nowadays, yes, because I have a grandson which would be the next generation that he played last year, and it was, even though it was young, it was just a community kind of thing. They didn't go out and travel to different cities or schools and all that. So a lot of the teams that were around in 2013 are not around now. You know, there was a team out of the, I want to say the Eisenhower area. It wasn't related. It was, they fed a lot of kids to Eisenhower. There was a program up in Romeo. It's not there no more. The head coach at that time did not, he wanted it, but after a couple of years, he stopped supporting it. So then there was some travel teams that kind of fizzed away too. One program that I initially helped, just lightly helped out, was a Anchor Bay team, and I don't think they exist anymore.
Anchor Bay is still playing high school lacrosse, but it hasn't grown like you might expect. I think that's fairly accurate.
Yeah.
What do you like about lacrosse, and what do you like about, more importantly, what do you like about youth lacrosse? What kept you going all those years? And by the way, what was your son's names?
My oldest son was Daniel Forbes, or Dan Forbes, and then my youngest was David Forbes. And both of them, you know, were one of my, not because they were my boys, because I was more tougher on them. And a number of times people told me to back off. Don't be so tough on your own sons. And I figured, you know, I needed to be tough so they could be a good player, and people never questioned it. But what was the love for it? It was a combination of everything. One of the first middle school, I'm going to say, tournament teams or whatever, we took some of our Macomb players over to Novi and trained with them, and I was part of the team that we called ourselves Team Michigan, and we went out to Buffalo, New York, and Buffalo teams and teams from the surrounding areas or states that was in this tournament were afraid to play us because we're from Michigan, and they thought we were going to be playing what they nicknamed it combat lacrosse. But with support of my mentors, Frank and Mike Jolly, Roger Button, and all that, we showed them different, that we're not combat lacrosse. And a few of the coaches actually grabbed me on the side and said, between games and breaks and evenings, and said, you know, we'd like to sit with you and show us, you know, show you what we do out here, and you can take that back to Michigan. And that's when the real love came into the sport. I mean, I seen what it was all about. I watched some college games and stuff like that, and it was like, okay, I you know, I want to learn more. And that's one thing. I always wanted to, no matter whatever I got involved with, I always wanted to learn. If
Yeah.
I was interested, I took the time and learned.
Yeah, what do you miss?
Pardon me?
What do you miss?
What do I miss? I don't miss the politics. That's one thing I don't miss, but I miss the teaching of the kids, the young men, the players, um, the camaraderie of other teams and parents' involvements and stuff like that. It was just, as people said in the early stages, "Oh, you're lacrosse? Welcome to the family." And at that time, I didn't understand welcome to the family because lacrosse wasn't so popular. But then I started realizing that it's really an elite kind of program, a sport. Not everybody plays it. Not everybody does it. Not everybody gets involved. And it was just heartwarming to me that, you know, we'd go travel, we at that time we were taking some trips out east and stuff like that, and the boys would wear their lacrosse jerseys, or I'd have my shirt with one thing on lacrosse, and guys would stop me and say, "Where are you guys from?" "Michigan." "You guys got lacrosse in Michigan?" "Yeah." And next time, it was like 15 minutes, half hour later, and my wife's trying to pull me away. We got to get moving here. I'm having a good conversation with this guy.
The thread that kind of permeates through all these interviews is there's a guy with a pickup truck in this town, and there's a guy with a van in that town that would go pick up kids or equipment. And the sport grew because of guys like you. And I think that's a testament to what we're doing now. I just wanted to thank you for the time spending with us today, and to congratulate you on all the work that you did in Macomb County, because there's a lot of kids playing now that wouldn't be playing because of the efforts that you made. So as a secretary of the Coaches Association doing these interviews, I just wanted to take the time to thank you and congratulate you and on all the work and all the hard sweat and toil that you provided for all those kids in your own community.
I'd like to thank you. And I didn't do it for any kind of pride of myself or anything. I did it for the love of the sport. And I truly mean that. I mean, it was very heartwarming that I was able to, give a period of my life into this. I mean, I gave up coaching other sports just for this. And it was great.
We appreciate your time. And again, good luck and best in the future.